I just sold my company for $42 million. 40 years of late nights, broken holidays, and deals that nearly broke me, and it was finally over. I thought I'd earned one night to just breathe. So I booked the best table in town, linen on the tables, music drifting through the air, my son Michael and his wife Evelyn dancing like a perfect little picture. I raised my glass of orange juice, ready to toast a clean start. That's when a hand landed on my shoulder. The restaurant's head of security leaned in, low enough that no one else could hear him. "Sir? I just saw your son put something in your drink." In that moment, my world didn't just tilt, it cracked. "Before I take you deeper into this story, tell me, where are you watching from, and what time is it right now?" I used to think selling a company was the hardest part of being a founder. Turns out, it's the easy part. You sign papers, shake a hand, and a number gets wired to your account. What no one tells you is that walking into retirement with enemies you didn't know you had, that's the real danger. That night was supposed to be my victory lap. My son, Michael, was buzzing with the kind of energy you can't fake. He'd always wanted to stand where I stood, at the top, respected, feared, envied. He wasn't there yet, but he was hungry. Evelyn, his wife, was calmer, polished. Always with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. She was the one who could turn charm into strategy, into pressure, into subtle pushes. At Sterling Terrace, the three of us sat at the table that overlooked the entire city. Lanterns above us, violins somewhere in the corner, and a skyline that felt like it was clapping just for me. I ordered wine for them and orange juice for myself. Doctor's orders. Michael laughed about travel plans we hadn't even made. Evelyn scribbled in her little notebook. She always pretended to be writing ideas down, like she was the secretary of our lives. I smiled because that's what fathers do, but something inside me was already uneasy. When the music shifted, Evelyn nudged Michael. "Come on," she whispered. "This is our song." They moved to the dance floor, slow, swaying like a couple with everything in front of them. That's when Mr. Riley appeared. Big man, quiet presence, the kind of security chief you don't notice until you need him. He leaned down so close I felt his breath warm against my ear. "Sir," he said, steady as stone, "I saw your son put something in your drink." I froze. My hand was on the glass. My eyes lifted to the dance floor. Michael spun Evelyn like they were auditioning for happiness. "Are you sure?" I whispered. "I don't mistake things like this," he said. "Small vial. Clear cap." He poured it fast. "I suggest you don't touch that glass again." My chest tightened. My fingers slipped from the stem. For a moment, all I could hear was my pulse drowning out the music. My son. My only son. I didn't drink. Instead, I slid the glass slightly away, careful, casual. I pulled out my phone, opened the camera, and tilted it just enough to catch Michael's smile across the room. He was laughing, completely at ease, as if he hadn't just tried to end his father's night, and maybe his life. I asked Mr. Riley softly. "What happens now?" he said. "Whatever you decide. But if you'd like, I can stay close." That was when I realized this wasn't just a celebration anymore. It was a test. A test of how quickly I could decide whether I still wanted to live. Michael and Evelyn came back to the table, cheeks flushed, eyes bright. Michael looked at the empty space where my glass had been and raised an eyebrow. "Already finished your juice, Dad?" I smiled. "Old men get thirsty watching young people dance." He chuckled, but I saw it, the flicker of disappointment behind his eyes. Evelyn reached for her notebook again, but her smile was just a shade too sharp. Dinner arrived. I ate carefully, slowly, pretending everything was normal. Pretending I didn't feel the weight of that empty glass staring at me like a loaded gun. After dessert, I pushed my chair back and stood. "It's been a long day," I said, sliding cash onto the tray. "I'm heading out." Michael frowned. "So soon?" "We were thinking about dessert, maybe another drink." "Another time," I told him. "You two stay. Enjoy the night." I hugged Evelyn lightly, kissed her cheek. hugged Michael a second longer than usual. And when I let go, I felt the tilt in his posture, like he didn't understand why I still had strength in me. Then I walked out, past Mr. Riley, who nodded once. My feet carried me into the night air, cooler now, sharper, and I realized this wasn't an accident. My son hadn't just made a mistake. He had crossed a line you don't come back from. And I would have to decide how to live with that. When you walk away from a table where your own son may have just tried to kill you, the night air feels different. It's colder, sharper, like the city itself wants to cut through you. I didn't go straight home. I wandered. A man with $42 million in his account shouldn't look lost, but that's exactly what I was, an old man on the sidewalk, staring at neon signs like they might spell out an answer. By the time I reached my apartment, my hands were still shaking. I locked the door, every deadbolt, every chain, then poured myself a plain glass of water. I held it up in the light, staring at it like it was a stranger. That's what happens after betrayal. You don't trust the simplest things anymore. Not even water. I sat at my desk, pulled a yellow legal pad in front of me, and wrote 3 words in big letters. Lab lawyer. Locks. That was my plan. First, the lab. I'd kept a little of the juice in a pill bottle, slipped under the table when no one was watching. If it was poisoned, or drugged, I needed proof. Proof that would hold up, not just suspicions in the mind of a father who didn't want to believe his son had turned predator. Second, the lawyer. Rachel Hoyle. She'd been my counsel through messy contracts and boardroom battles. She was blunt, practical, and allergic to lies. If I was going to dismantle my son's access to my fortune, she was the one who could build the legal firewalls. And third, the locks. If Michael and Evelyn were willing to poison me in public, what would they do in private? I couldn't give them a second chance. The next morning, I called the lab. Private, discreet. I didn't tell them what I suspected. Just that I had a sample I needed tested urgently. I drove it over myself, handing the small bottle to a chemist who didn't blink when I said I needed chain of custody forms signed. While I waited for the results, I called Rachel. She didn't ask me if I was sure. She asked me for facts. That's who she was. Daniel, she said, don't tell me how you feel. Tell me what you can prove. So I told her, about Mr. Riley, about the vial, about the glass, about my son's too casual remark when he saw the juice was gone. She was silent for a long moment. Then, all right. We start today. Separate your money from his reach. New protocols. Revocations. You ready for that? I swallowed. My throat was dry. Yes. Good, she said. Because you don't get to hesitate now. The locks came third. I called a locksmith I trusted, the kind who didn't ask questions, just showed up with a tool belt and an invoice. By noon, every door in my apartment had a new heart. Deadbolts, strike plates, reinforced frames. When he was done, I walked him out, thanked him, and stood in the hallway listening to the echo of my own footsteps. It felt like I was a guest in my own home. Inside, I opened the refrigerator. Every bottle, every carton, every jar, out. If it wasn't sealed, it went into the trash. I scrubbed down the shelves until the smell of cleaner filled the room. My kitchen looked less like a kitchen and more like a lab itself. Because that's what survival looks like sometimes. Not grand gestures. Just throwing away milk you can't trust. That evening, the lab called. A man with a steady voice gave me the results like he was reading the weather. Preliminary analysis confirms benzodiazepine. Combined with alcohol, very sedative. There are also traces of warfarin. Given your age and heart medication, the combination could be extremely dangerous. I closed my eyes. The words landed heavy, one by one. Not an accident. Not a prank. Not paranoia. It was real. I whispered, "Thank you," and hung up. For a long time, I just stood at the window, staring down at the street below. People walking dogs, kids with backpacks, a delivery guy balancing too many boxes. All of them moving through their ordinary lives, while mine had just split into two versions, before and after the glass. I didn't sleep much that night. I sat in my living room with the lights on, a folder of documents spread out in front of me. Bank papers, estate files, power of attorney forms I had signed years ago without thinking twice. Forms that gave Michael a foothold into my fortune, my accounts, my future. My future that he just tried to erase. By dawn, I knew this wasn't just about surviving one poisoned drink. This was about cutting off every single avenue he could use to finish the job. If he wanted my money, he'd find himself staring at walls instead of doors. If he wanted my life, he'd discover I'd already learned how to breathe through betrayal. That was the morning I became something I hadn't been in years, not a CEO, not a father, but a survivor with a list. And survivors with lists are dangerous. The morning after the lab confirmed everything, I sat at my kitchen table with the blinds half open, staring at a glass of plain water. The irony didn't escape me. Water, juice, wine, it all looked the same until you knew what was inside. The phone buzzed. It was Michael. "Dad, where'd you disappear to last night? You left in a rush." Evelyn and I were worried. Worried. The word made my teeth clench. I didn't answer right away. I just watched the glass sweat on the table. Finally I said, "Long day. Needed rest." He hesitated, then softened his voice like he was calling from a stage. "We should come by tonight. Talk things through. Evelyn's making dinner." I almost laughed. Dinner. With them. A second chance to finish what they started. "Not tonight," I said. "I've got things to handle." "What things?" he pressed. "Just things." And I hung up. By mid-morning, I was in Rachel's office. She already had a thick folder on her desk, color-coded tabs peeking out like sharp little flags. "We start here," she said, sliding papers toward me. "Revocation of powers of attorney. Your son has too much access. That ends today." I signed. My hand didn't shake, though my chest still felt tight. "Next, bank protections. You'll move funds into temporary escrow while we build the trust. Independent trustee. No family." "Not even Michael?" I asked, already knowing the answer. Rachel's eyes were steady. "Especially not Michael." I nodded. My pen scratched across the page again. "Good," she said. "Now housing. We change your locks, which you've already done. But I'm filing building instructions. Your son and Evelyn lose access. Effective immediately." Her voice was clinical, precise. Mine was low, almost hoarse. "Do it." That evening, I gave the concierge my new instructions. "If Michael or Evelyn show up, don't let them in. Call me first. Then call security." The concierge didn't blink. Men in his line of work learn not to. Back upstairs, I packed a small overnight bag. Just in case. My apartment no longer felt like mine. It felt like a waiting room for someone else's plan. I slept at a hotel that night. Alone, with the chair propped against the door. Not because the chair would stop anyone, but because it told me which way the danger was coming from. The next day brought another text. This one colder. "Dad, this is getting ridiculous. You're shutting us out. People will think you've lost it. If you want to keep this family intact, stop doing stupid things. We'll talk tonight, just us. Don't involve outsiders." Outsiders. He meant Rachel. He meant Riley. He meant anyone who wasn't under his thumb. I forwarded the text to Rachel. Her reply was 3 words: saved. Logged. Ignore. That's when I realized I wasn't just protecting myself anymore. I was building a case. Every paper signed, every lock changed, every message forwarded was one more brick in a wall Michael couldn't climb. 3 days later, Rachel arranged a meeting. Michael and Evelyn walked in together, holding hands like they practiced a pose in front of a mirror. Evelyn set her little notebook on the table. Michael leaned back, casual, like he wasn't sitting across from the father whose drink he'd poisoned. "We're worried about Dad," Michael began, voice heavy with false concern. He's been paranoid. Forgetful. Maybe unwell. I set a document on the table. Chain of custody from the lab. Then another. Toxicology report confirming benzodiazepine and warfarin. Then another. Bank revocations, stamped and signed. Finally, I looked up at my son and said, "You call this paranoia? Or do you call it proof?" Michael's face tightened, but Evelyn leaned in, soft voice dripping honey. "Daniel, we just wanted you to rest. To slow down. To enjoy what you've built. Maybe you misunderstood." "Misunderstood?" I snapped. "I watched Riley hand me my own life back. I watched the lab test your poison. And now I'm watching you try to sell me sympathy like it's currency." Silence. Rachel finally spoke. "Here are the terms. No access to his accounts. No direct asks for money. Weekly therapy sessions verified. Communication through counsel only. Violate it, and we escalate legally. Criminally if necessary." Michael's jaw worked like he wanted to speak but couldn't find the right words. Evelyn only smiled thinly, tapping her pen against her notebook. For the first time, I felt something strange. Not fear. Not rage. Just distance. The kind of distance you feel when you realize someone you love is standing on the other side of a canyon you'll never cross again. That night, I walked through the park, the one with benches no one bothers to name. I sat down and watched the wind move through the trees. I thought about my wife. About the early years when we had nothing but $20 and stubborn hope. About raising Michael, teaching him chess, telling him bedtime stories about courage and fairness. And I thought about the glass of juice. The vial. The betrayal. A man can survive a lot. But there's no coming back from the moment you realize your own son has traded your heartbeat for his inheritance. That was the night I decided something final. Michael wouldn't get another chance. Not with my life. Not with my money. Not with my name. From then on, survival wasn't just instinct. It was strategy. And strategy was something I'd always been good at. The thing about betrayal is, it doesn't end when you catch it. It echoes. Every look, every silence, every word afterward feels like a trap. 2 nights after the confrontation in Rachel's office, I agreed to meet Michael and Evelyn at Sterling Terrace again. Not because I wanted to, but because I needed them to show their hand. The restaurant hadn't changed. Same lanterns strung across the terrace, same polished waiters, same music drifting from the corner. Only I had changed. I wasn't a father coming for dinner. I was a man walking into a battlefield. I ordered simply, grilled fish, vegetables, and water. No juice. No wine. Evelyn raised her glass of red, smiled too wide, and said, "To family." I didn't raise mine. "To survival," I said quietly, and drank my water. Michael's smile faltered, just for a second. But I saw it. Halfway through the meal, Evelyn leaned in, her voice sugar over steel. "Daniel, you've worked so hard. You deserve peace. Let us handle the details, your accounts, your properties. You shouldn't have to worry about all that." I looked at her, then at Michael. "Funny thing," I said. "Peace doesn't come from handing your keys to people who just tried to lock you out of your own life." Michael shifted in his chair. "Dad, you're exaggerating. It was nothing. You didn't even drink it. Why blow this up?" "Because," I said, setting my fork down, "you meant for me to drink it. And once a man knows that, there's no going back." The table went silent. Only the clinking of silverware from other diners filled the space between us. Then Evelyn tried a different tactic. She nodded toward the bar, and a woman I'd never seen before walked over, mid-40s, professional, clipboard in hand. "Mr. Whitmore," she said, "I'm a geriatric care manager. Your family asked me to consult. They're worried about your health. Forgetfulness. Paranoia. Maybe a cognitive evaluation would help." My jaw tightened. An ambush. They weren't just after my money anymore. They were laying the groundwork to paint me incompetent. To make me legally powerless. "Not tonight," I said flatly. Sir, sometimes a neutral assessment. Not tonight, I repeated louder this time. I turned toward the rail where Mr. Riley stood. Would you tell this table what you saw last week? He stepped forward, calm, professional. I observed your son pour liquid from a vial into your glass while you were watching the band. I reported it immediately. Security footage has been preserved. The care manager froze. Evelyn's pen stopped moving. Michael's face drained of color. I leaned back, my voice steady. That's my evaluation. We're done here. Evelyn tried to laugh it off, but her voice cracked. Daniel, you're making a scene. I shook my head. No. I'm describing one. You made it. Michael's hand trembled on his glass. For the first time, he looked less like a man and more like the boy who used to break remote controls just to see how they worked. Only now, the thing he broke was trust, and there was no fixing it. I slid 2 envelopes across the table. Thick, heavy with paper. Option A. I file a criminal complaint tonight. The lab report, Riley's testimony, the footage, it all goes to the police. You explain to a judge why your father's drink contained poison. Michael swallowed. And option B? Option B, you accept the structure already in motion. The trust. The revocations. Therapy for both of you, weekly, with attendance verified. You never asked me for money again. You live with what you're given, or with nothing at all. That's the only mercy you'll get. The quartet in the corner shifted into a minor key. The timing was perfect, like the music itself had been listening. Evelyn's smile finally cracked. That's punishment. No, I said. That's governance. Michael leaned forward, jaw tight. And what do we get if we pick B? You get time, I said. You get not being in a courtroom. You get a chance, if you want it, to rebuild yourselves. You also get a letter I wrote. Not an apology, not a sermon. A map if you choose to open it. I tapped the envelope. It's inside. Michael stared at the envelopes like they were explosives. His hand hovered, then withdrew. I want to see the video. You will, I said. Tomorrow morning. In Rachel's office. 9 o'clock sharp. If you don't show, the other envelope goes to the police by 10. They both went quiet. The music swelled. Dishes clattered. Life continued around us, indifferent to the quiet war at our table. Finally, Michael whispered, You're really doing this? I looked him dead in the eye. I already did it. Tonight is just me telling you. When I stood to leave, Evelyn reached for her notebook, like she could rewrite the scene before it ended. But this wasn't her story anymore. I nodded to Riley. Thank you. If you ever need a reference, you have mine. He gave a small, professional bow. Glad you're alive, sir. I walked out into the night air, cooler than before, sharper, almost clean. Behind me, I left my son with 2 envelopes, a wife whose smile finally failed her, and a choice either of them wanted to make. I didn't know if they'd pick A or B. But I did know one thing, I'd never sit at a table with an unguarded glass again. The night after I gave my son 2 envelopes, I didn't go home. I didn't even go back to my hotel. I walked the city for hours, shoes carrying me block after block, until my knees ached and the air burned in my lungs. When I finally stopped, it was outside a 24-hour diner I hadn't set foot in since the early days of my company. I ordered black coffee, no food. The waitress asked if I was okay. I lied. Just a long night. The truth was, I didn't know if I was a father anymore, or just a target with the wrong last name. At 12:41 a.m., my phone buzzed. Concierge from my building. Mr. Whitmore, apologies, but your son and his wife are here with a locksmith. They claim emergency maintenance. Our system flagged the request. Do not let them in, I said immediately. Call security. Call the police if you need to. Yes, sir. He didn't ask questions. He didn't need to. Minutes later, I pulled up the hallway camera feed from my phone. There they were, Michael in his suit jacket, Evelyn with sunglasses on even though it was midnight. The locksmith crouched at my door, toolkit open. Unauthorized. Security told them firmly. You'll need to leave. Evelyn tried the sympathy card. He's elderly. We're worried. I work for the elderly in question, the guard replied. And he says no. Michael looked straight into the camera lens, then looked away. He knew I was watching. Eventually they left. But it wasn't relief I felt. It was confirmation. This wasn't desperation. It was a campaign. At 1:27 a.m., a new text lit up my phone. Unknown number. If you insist on making this ugly, we'll petition for guardianship. Judges are tired. Paperwork is easy. Don't force us. Guardianship. That word froze me more than poison. They weren't just trying to take my money anymore. They wanted to erase me while I was still breathing. I forwarded the text to Rachel. Her reply came fast, logged. Keep your phone on. You're not alone. But sitting in that diner, staring at a cold cup of coffee, I felt very, very alone. At 3:01 a.m., another knock came. This time not on my apartment, but on the hotel room I'd finally stumbled into. 2 measured taps. Who is it? I asked without moving. Front desk. 2 visitors asking for you. My name isn't even on this room, I said. That's what makes it interesting, the voice replied. I told them to put my visitors in the lobby under camera. If they wanted to talk, it would be in daylight. The clerk approved. Understood, sir. Silence returned. Heavy silence. Half an hour later, I checked the peephole anyway. Michael. Alone. Dad? He whispered through the door. Please. Off the record. Let me in. There was a moment, the kind of moment where you want to believe your child, even after every knife in the back. But I kept the chain tight. Say it through the door, I told him. He sighed, pressed his forehead against the frame. You're making this bigger than it was. It was nothing. Evelyn just thought you needed rest. You didn't even drink it. Why destroy everything? I closed my eyes. My voice came out steadier than I felt. Because, Michael, the minute you shook that vial over my glass, you destroyed it yourself. He slid down the wall, sitting on the floor like a boy in detention. If I pick a, he whispered. What happens? You stand in a courtroom, I said. You answer questions under oath. And your last name ends up in headlines for all the wrong reasons. He swallowed. And B? You get boundaries, I told him. Therapy. A trust deed between you and money. No more control. No more tricks. That's the only path you've got left. He stayed quiet for a long time. Then, we'll come at 9. See the video. Sign what you want. Just don't call the police yet. I didn't promise him anything. Then leave now, I said. His footsteps faded. Evelyn's heels followed moments later. Only then did I remove the chair from the door. By sunrise I was still awake, still sitting in that hotel room, staring at the watch I'd once bought to celebrate my first million. I buckled it on again. Funny thing about watches, you can buy them to measure time, but you never expect them to measure betrayal. I'd opened the letter I'd written to Michael, added one more line. If you want forgiveness, bring me a fact, not another excuse. Then I sealed it again. At 9 o'clock sharp, I walked into Rachel's office. Michael and Evelyn were already there, sitting too close together, hands clasped like actors who didn't believe their own script. Rachel hit play on the security footage. The vial flashed. The juice darkened. My son's shoulders squared as if no one was watching. When the clip ended, the room was silent. Michael didn't look at me. He didn't look at Rachel. He just nodded once, the kind of nod a man gives when he finally sees the sign he's been pretending not to. We'll take B, he muttered. Evelyn squeezed his hand, but for once, her smile didn't come. And me? I just sat there, breathing. Because sometimes victory doesn't look like applause. It looks like still being alive when your enemies expected you not to be. By the time Saturday rolled around, I wasn't nervous anymore. I was ready. I'd stopped looking at Michael and Evelyn as family. That word didn't fit them now. They were opponents. And opponents get terms. I chose Sterling Terrace again. Same table, same skyline, same lanterns swaying overhead. But this time I wasn't celebrating. I was staging a trial. When they arrived, they looked perfect, like they were auditioning for the role of devoted son and daughter-in-law. Michael leaned in for a hug. Evelyn kissed my cheek, perfume sweet, smile sharp. Dad, Michael said, thank you for inviting us. This isn't an invitation, I told him. It's a meeting. Sit down. They did. Evelyn set her notebook by her water glass. Michael folded his hands like he was the one in charge. I slid 2 envelopes across the linen. One marked A. One marked B. The waiter came, menus in hand. I waved him off. Later. First we talk. Michael frowned. What's this about? Proof, I said, pulling out the lab report, Riley's statement, the chain of custody. I laid each document on the table like playing cards. This is what was in my drink. This is who saw you do it. This is how we preserved it. Michael's face tightened. Evelyn's pen tapped once, then stopped. You're making a scene, she said softly. No, I told her. I'm describing one. You two made it. I nodded toward the bar. Riley walked over, hands clasped, voice steady. I observed Mr. Whitmore's son introduce liquid into his father's glass. I reported it immediately. The video is secured. Silence. Thick, suffocating silence. Evelyn tried to smile again, but it was paper thin. Dan, we never. Don't. I cut her off. Call things by their names. The waiter returned awkwardly. I ordered water, nothing else. They ordered wine, pretending to be relaxed. When he left, I tapped the envelopes. Here are the terms. A or B. Michael's eyes narrowed. What's in them? A is police, I said. I file a criminal complaint tonight. Witness, video, lab report, it all goes to the DA. And B? Evelyn asked, voice sharp now. B is boundaries. You accept the trust structure. You go to therapy, weekly, verified. You never asked me for money again. You stop trying to pry open doors that are closed. And you leave me out of your games. That's punishment, she snapped. I leaned in. No. That's governance. Punishment would mean you sitting in a cell tonight. Michael laughed once, bitter. A year of therapy? You're serious? I've been giving you assignments your whole life, I told him. You ignored everyone. This is the retest. And it comes with witnesses. Evelyn's eyes darted to the envelopes. And if we say no? Then envelope A goes straight to the authorities. I sat back, folded my arms. Choose. The waiter brought plates, but none of us ate. The envelopes sat between us like live explosives. Michael finally broke the silence. Let me see the video. You will, I said. Tomorrow morning, 9 o'clock, in Rachel's office. If you don't show, envelope A gets mailed at 10. Evelyn leaned forward. And if we do show? If we choose B? Then you get time, I told her. Time to rebuild if you can. Time to avoid headlines and courtrooms. One chance. Only one. The quartet in the corner shifted into something brighter, but it didn't touch our table. Our table was a battlefield. Michael's hand hovered over envelope A. Then he withdrew. He touched B instead, weighing it, staring at it like it might burn through his skin. One condition, he said finally. We see the video first. You will, I repeated. Evelyn's smile flickered, almost broke. And if we don't come? Then the police will. I stood, signaling the meeting was over. Riley stepped forward, always watching, always steady. Michael looked up at me, eyes dark. You'd really do this to your own son? I met his stare. You stopped being my son the second you tried to poison me. Tonight you're just a man choosing between a courtroom and a therapist's office. He didn't answer. He just looked at envelope B again, shoulders sagging. When I left, I didn't look back. I walked out under the lanterns, into the night air, cooler and sharper than when I'd come in. At 8:07 p.m., my phone buzzed. A text from Michael. B. We'll be there at 9. I slipped the phone back into my pocket and whispered to the dark. Then let's see if you mean it. Rachel's office has always been cold, clean, and brutally honest. No art on the walls, no fake plants, no distractions, just glass, steel, and paper. The kind of room where truth gets written down whether you like it or not. That morning, I walked in first. The conference table was set, 4 glasses of water, untouched, a carafe in the middle. 2 folders stacked neatly at Rachel's right hand. The screen on the wall was black, waiting to wake up. Michael and Evelyn were already there. They stood when I entered, smiles rehearsed, clothes perfect. They wanted to look like family. They wanted to look like control. Dad, Michael said, reaching out like this was going to be a warm reunion. This isn't a reunion, I told him, keeping my hands at my sides. It's a reckoning. Sit down. They did. Evelyn pulled out her little notebook again, pen ready. Always the actress taking notes in a play that had already been written. Rachel wasted no time. We'll start with the video. She clicked the remote, and the screen came alive. Sterling Terrace filled the room in sharp detail. There I was, at my table. There was the band, the lanterns, the skyline. Beautiful, ordinary, until it wasn't. We watched in silence. Michael reached into his pocket, pulled out the vial. Tilted it over my glass. Poured it fast, smooth, like a man who had practiced. Stirred with his fork. Then leaned back, smiling at the music. Rachel froze the frame right there. His hand still hovering, the glass glowing under the lantern light. Nobody said a word. The only sound was the hum of the screen. Then she pressed play again. The rest of the scene unfolded, me returning, lifting the glass, Riley stepping forward, me setting it down. Proof that a decision had been made. When the screen went black, it felt like the oxygen left with it. Michael's voice cracked the silence. It wasn't what it looks like. Stop, I told him. It's exactly what it looks like. Evelyn tried instead. Daniel, listen. It was a mistake. A misjudgment. A supplement. He never meant harm. Rachel slid a document across the table. Toxicology results. Benzodiazepine and warfarin. Combined with his prescriptions, the result could have been fatal. Not theoretical. Not a supplement. Poison. Evelyn's jaw twitched, but she kept her face smooth. Michael looked down, staring at the polished table like it might give him an excuse he hadn't found yet. I leaned forward. So tell me, do I call this paranoia or do I call it proof? Rachel didn't let them answer. She opened the first folder, read from the stipulations. Section 1, access revoked. No entry into Mr. Whitmore's home. No locksmiths, no keys, no excuses. You do not wait in the lobby. You do not loiter outside. You are not welcome inside without written permission. Michael shifted. We just wanted to. You wanted my apartment. I cut in. You wanted the doors, the safes, the access. Those days are over. Rachel continued, her voice steady, professional. Section 2, communication. You will not contact him directly. Not by phone, not by text, not by email. All contact goes through me. You try the midnight knocks again, and you'll find a police officer answering instead. Evelyn raised her chin. That's cruel. That's boundary, Rachel said. She flipped to the next page. Section 3, finances. You will not ask him for money. You will not imply need, invent emergencies, or involve third parties. You will not touch his accounts, attempt transfers, or present yourself as authorized. The trust now stands between you and every dollar. Michael's fists clenched. So we're cut off? You were never entitled, I said. You were given. That giving ends now. Rachel pressed on. Section 4, Guardianship. You will not petition a court to declare him incompetent. You will not file ex parte. If you have concerns, you bring them to me first. No more midnight paperwork meant to strip him of control. Evelyn finally broke. We were scared. He's older, he's... Stop, I said, my voice shaking with anger. I am not incapable. I am betrayed. The room went still again. Rachel slid the second folder open. Section 5, Therapy. Both of you. Weekly. Attendance verified. A full year. This isn't optional. It isn't symbolic. It's the minimum requirement for staying in this family in any form. Michael scoffed. Therapy? A year? I leaned closer, my eyes locked on his. You tried to drug me. You plotted to take what I built. And you laugh at therapy? If you can't show up for that, you can't show up for me. He didn't answer. Evelyn tapped her pen once, twice, then stopped. Her smile was gone now. Rachel placed the trust documents on the table next. Independent trustee, Marion Klein. Not family. Not influenced. She decides distributions. You don't get checks. You get needs covered, if she agrees. Health, education, maintenance, support. That's it. Evelyn tried to sound calm, but her voice cracked. Define maintenance. The trustee defines it, Rachel said. Not you. That's the point. Michael's voice was flat. So we're prisoners of this trustee. No, I said. You're protected from yourselves. You get food on your table and a roof over your heads. But you don't get access to the vault you just tried to break into. The last document Rachel slid across was thinner, lighter. The foundation. The Astor Foundation? Small grants for schools, food banks, neighborhood trees. Daniel's legacy. Not for statues, not for headlines, for shade. Evelyn said nothing. Michael stared at the page without moving. Finally, Rachel closed both folders. 2 envelopes were offered. You're here, so we assume you've chosen B. If you violate it, option A triggers automatically. Police, no discussion. Michael nodded once. His voice was barely above a whisper. We'll take B. Evelyn's silence said more than any speech. Rachel slid the signature pages across. Initial here, here, and here. Full signatures at the end. The only sound was pens scratching paper. When it was done, Rachel stacked the documents, tapped them into alignment, and locked them into her briefcase. Michael pushed his chair back, stood without looking at me. Evelyn followed. At the door, she turned, her mask back in place. Dan will keep our side. If you keep yours. I met her eyes. I already have. They left. The latch clicked shut behind them. For the first time in weeks, I let my shoulders drop. I looked at Rachel. She nodded once. The fire breaks are in. You'll sleep safer tonight. Will I? I asked. She tilted her head. Safer doesn't mean safe. But it's a start. I stood, walked to the window. The city kept moving below. Cabs honked. People hurried. Life didn't care that my family had just been dismantled on paper. But I cared. Because paper was the only reason I was still standing. The day after they signed the papers, the city didn't look any different. The streets were loud, the coffee shops crowded, buses still groaning through intersections. Civilization doesn't pause just because your family declared war on you. But inside me, everything had changed. The trust was alive now, breathing like its own organism. Not just paper, not just signatures, something sturdier. Marion Klein, the trustee, called me personally. Her voice was calm, grounded, the kind of voice you trust even if you've never met the person. I've reviewed the documents, she said. I'll enforce every line. I don't work for you. I don't work for your son. I work for the trust. That's why I chose you. I told her. Good, she replied. You'll hear from me quarterly. Unless there's trouble. I almost laughed. Trouble was the one thing I could guarantee. That same afternoon, a courier dropped off a red folder from Rachel. Inside were duplicates of every signature page, neatly bound. Her cover letter was only one sentence: "You are insulated. Don't test the walls. Let them hold." I set the folder in the hotel safe, right next to the watch I hadn't worn in years. The one I'd bought when my company made its first million. Funny how objects change meaning. Once it was ambition. Now it was survival. That night, I pulled out the letter I'd written to Michael. I reread it under the yellow hotel lamp. "You tried to poison me. That doesn't get erased. But you are still my son. If you want to be something other than the man who poured that vial, you'll have to earn it. I won't hand you forgiveness. You'll have to fight for change the way I fought to stay alive that night." I sealed it again. Left it in the safe beside the folder. Not ready to give it to him. Not yet. Maybe not ever. 2 days later, Rachel called. Her voice was calm, but I could hear the edge. "Evelyn filed a guardianship petition this morning. Claimed you're paranoid, forgetful, losing capacity." My stomach dropped. "And?" The clerk flagged it immediately. "Our stipulation was filed 48 hours earlier. Her petition is dead on arrival." I pictured Evelyn at her desk, drafting the forms with that little pen she always carried. I pictured her rehearsing her arguments in the mirror, then slamming the pen down when the rejection came. Rachel's voice softened, just barely. "If she tries again, we'll move for sanctions. Don't worry. The wall's held." I whispered. "Good." But part of me still felt sick. Because it wasn't just about money anymore. It was about erasing me before I was gone. Michael, on the other hand, went silent. No phone calls, no knocks at midnight. Just one email through Rachel. "We've scheduled therapy. Wednesdays, 3 p.m. We'll attend. We'll comply." I read it 3 times. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't confession. But it was movement. And movement, even reluctant, can shift the ground. I typed back only 2 words: verified. Proceed. That weekend, I forced myself to step back into my apartment. The locks were new, the doorman alert, but the air inside felt heavy. I walked from room to room, touching the backs of chairs, the edges of framed photographs, the cold surface of the kitchen counter. Everything looked like mine, but none of it felt like home. I stayed long enough to grab files and clothes, then stood at the window one last time. The river below sparkled in the sun. For years I looked at that view with pride. Now it looked back at me with indifference. I whispered to the glass, "I outlived you, Michael. Don't make me outlive the memory of you, too." Then I locked the door and went back to the hotel. The following Friday, Rachel spread out a new set of papers in front of me. "Bank protections are in place. Trust defunded. Guardianship defanged. Next step, estate plan revisions. Your will needs to match the trust. No ambiguity. Ambiguity is oxygen for opportunists." She slid the draft toward me. I skimmed it. The estate would flow straight into the trust. Evelyn's name was nowhere. Michael's only appeared conditionally, years down the line, depending on proof of compliance. Rachel studied me as I read. "How do you feel?" "Like I buried something," I admitted. Her tone softened. "Sometimes burial is protection." Nights at the hotel were different now. I still propped the chair against the door out of habit, but sleep came easier. I didn't wake to phantom knocks or poisoned glasses. I woke to ordinary things: sirens, elevators, the hum of other people's lives through the walls. And for the first time in weeks, ordinary felt like a luxury. One evening, I opened my notebook and started writing. Not contracts, not code, not numbers, just words. Legacy isn't money. It isn't even the trust. Legacy is the story they tell about you when you can't correct them anymore. My son tried to write me out with poison. I rewrote myself with paper. If the paper holds, maybe the story will, too. I closed the notebook and set it aside. Whether Michael ever read those words didn't matter. What mattered was that they existed. A week later, Rachel called again. Therapist confirmed attendance. First 2 sessions. Both present. That's all we need to know. Good, I said. Her voice dropped a notch. Dan, I know this isn't what you wanted. You wanted family. What you have now is survival. I looked out the hotel window at the lights crawling across the skyline. Survival is family, I said. At least the part that's left. A few days later, Marion emailed me directly. Short, precise. The Whitmore Revocable Trust is fully operational. Beneficiaries acknowledged. Stipulations filed. Guardianship protections in place. You are protected. Congratulations. I stared at the word congratulations. It didn't feel like winning. It felt like plumbing that finally stopped leaking. But maybe that was enough. That night, I reopened the safe. The red folder was there. My old watch. And the letter to Michael, sealed again. I didn't destroy it. Didn't deliver it. Just left it waiting. Because some words don't belong to today. They belong to the day someone decides they're ready, or the day you decide you're done. And for now, I wasn't done. Because I was still alive. And sometimes, that's the loudest revenge you can get. Morning light slipped across the hotel curtains like it had nothing to do with me. But it did. It always does. When you survive something you weren't supposed to, even sunlight feels personal. I dressed slower than usual, not because of age, but because I wanted to feel the weight of each choice: shirt, tie, jacket. The kind of clothes you wear when you're about to face people who once tried to erase you. At 9 o'clock sharp, Rachel's office door opened. Michael and Evelyn were already there, sitting side by side at the long table. No sunglasses today. No fake notes. Just two people who looked like they hadn't slept much. Rachel didn't waste time. She placed a small envelope in front of me, the kind that carried truths instead of cash. We're here to finalize. Confirm attendance at therapy. Confirm stipulations. And if you choose, deliver any personal statements. I slid the envelope across to Michael. His name on the front, written in my hand. He stared at it for a long time. You can open it now, I said. Or never. But it's yours. He hesitated, then tucked it into his jacket pocket unopened. Later, he whispered. That was the first honest word I'd heard from him in months. Later. Not now. Not yet. Later. The meeting was short. Signatures, acknowledgments, nods. Rachel's lawyer voice filled the air with structure. No direct asks for money. No unauthorized visits. No guardianship petitions. Therapy attendance confirmed weekly. Michael signed. Evelyn signed. I signed last. The pens clicked shut like the locks on a vault. When it ended, Rachel gathered the papers with her usual precision. This is order, she said. Not peace. Don't confuse the two. I nodded. I knew the difference. Order is a wall. Peace is a choice. We walked out into the lobby together. For a moment, the three of us, father, son, and the woman who'd once tried to take my place in my own story, stood under the same fluorescent lights. Michael cleared his throat. Dad. His voice was smaller now. I know you don't believe me, but I didn't mean to. I stopped him. Don't finish that sentence. Meaning doesn't matter anymore. Actions do. Show up at therapy. Show up for yourself. That's how I'll know if you mean anything. He lowered his head. Evelyn stayed silent, her expression unreadable. I left them there and stepped outside. The city smelled like exhaust and roasted nuts from a corner cart. Ordinary. Beautiful in its indifference. For the first time in months, I didn't feel hunted. I walked without purpose until I found myself at the edge of the park. The same one I'd thought about so many times, the one with benches that don't carry names. I sat under a tree, its leaves swaying gently, whispering a language older than any betrayal. I closed my eyes and let the sound wash through me. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't a man counting enemies. I was just a man counting breaths. My phone buzzed. A text from Rachel, escrow complete. Foundation funded. You're free to breathe. I smiled. Free to breathe. That's all I'd ever wanted. I leaned back on the bench and whispered to no one in particular. You didn't get me, Michael. You didn't get my name. You didn't get my life. The tree above me rustled like it agreed. Later that evening, I opened my notebook again. Not to draft contracts, but to write one last thing. If you're hearing this, it means you walked with me to the end of the story. You saw the poison, the betrayals, the papers, the locks. You saw a son try to erase a father, and a father decide to live anyway. Maybe your storm doesn't look like mine. Maybe it's smaller. Maybe it's worse. But storms end. And when they do, you'll still be here, breathing. That's your revenge. That's your gift. Stay alive. Stay awake. And for God's sake, never let anyone else pour your drink. I closed the notebook, set it beside the watch, and poured a glass of water. Just water. Clear, clean, honest. The next morning, I caught my reflection in the mirror. I looked older. But I also looked alive. And that, I decided, was enough. If you stayed with me through this story, thank you. Maybe you've faced betrayal, maybe you haven't. But remember this, trust isn't given, it's tested. And survival is sometimes the most radical act of love you can show yourself. Drop a comment below. Tell me where you're listening from, or what time it is where you are. Maybe just one word. Because sometimes one word is enough to remind us, we were here, and we kept breathing.